Today we're going to be analyzing the source material we've gathered on Malcolm John Webster. His is a name that really should be synonymous with just cold calculation and a particular kind of financial cruelty.
It really is.
This is the story of a serial predator who saw relationships not as partnerships, but as sophisticated financial instruments.
Right. Instruments that could be liquidated through fraud, arson, and ultimately murder.
That's the essential frame for this material, isn't it?
It is. Our examination will really center on the precise, calculated nature of his criminal career, a career that spanned decades and continents.
We'll be looking at the evidence presented around his two major attempts at homicide.
That's right. The successful murder of his first wife in Scotland, and then the attempted murder of his second wife in New Zealand.
And both involve these elaborately staged car crashes.
Yes, specifically designed for insurance payouts. I mean, it's a case that's just defined by a methodical approach rooted entirely in greed.
So let's unpack his core identity straight away, because his professional background, it creates such a disturbing contrast with his crimes.
It really does.
Born in 1959, Webster was remarkably a nurse.
A nurse by trade, a profession that is built on trust.
Exactly. And yet, his criminal convictions are just staggering.
Murder, attempted murder, arson, theft, fraud, drugging.
And attempted bigamy. That list alone suggests a lifetime dedicated to deception.
And that extensive history points us directly toward the psychological profile that's detailed in the sources. A consultant forensic clinical psychologist, a Dr. Gary McPherson, prepared a report for the trial.
What did that find?
It diagnosed Webster with narcissistic personality disorder.
NPD.
Yes. And then separately, a police profiler labeled him a sociopath. These diagnoses aren't just academic footnotes, they are. They're critical lenses for understanding his actions.
Oh, so?
Well, the NPD explains that grandiose sense of self-importance, this belief that he was owed wealth and respect.
And the lack of empathy.
The profound lack of empathy, yes. It's what allowed him to see everyone around him purely as, resources to be exploited.
That sociopathic detachment it's necessary, isn't it, to commit that level of deception for a planned murder?
Oh, absolutely. It suggests his charm wasn't genuine connection at all.
It's just a tool.
A high-level tool for manipulation, exactly. When you look at the definition of a sociopath, you find traits like chronic lying, superficial charm, and a failure to conform to social norms.
Webster didn't just lie, though. He built entire alternate realities.
He did, repeatedly using the same fabricated life-threatening illnesses, leukemia, heart trouble, cancer, to elicit sympathy or, financial concessions from his victims.
Understanding that psychological immunity guilt is it's vital before we look at where his criminality began.
It is.
And this is where it gets highly complex, tracing the early foundations of this behavior against his family context. You would assume the son of a prominent law enforcement official would be, deterred from a life of crime.
But Webster's background suggests the exact opposite.
His father, Alexander Robertson Webster, wasn't just any police officer.
No, he was a detective chief superintendent, and he served as the head of the fraud squad in the Metropolitan Police.
And his mother, Odette Blewett, was a former nurse.
The irony there is it's stark. Webster specialized in the exact type of systematic financial fraud that his father was professionally dedicated to fighting.
That disconnect is staggering.
It is. You have to wonder if his father's position, perhaps inadvertently, provided Malcolm with a blueprint on how law enforcement operates.
How they investigate financial crime.
And, crucially, how to operate just outside the lines of prosecution.
It's almost as if he was daring the system, knowing the inner workings through his own parentage.
It seems that way. And the sources also provide evidence of his deceit beginning very, very early.
He left school at 15 with no qualifications.
Correct. But the behavioral patterns that foreshadowed his later crimes, they started well before then.
They certainly did. The early signs show manipulation and some dangerous tendencies.
He was prone to pretending to faint.
An early low-stakes attempt to use physical performance to gain attention or control a situation.
A tactic we see escalate dramatically later on with his feigned heart attacks.
More alarming, though, was his nickname.
Pyro. Earned because of a penchant for fires, this wasn't just a youthful fascination, it was a deadly skill he deployed repeatedly to claim insurance money and intimidate victims later.
And the most persistent lie of his adult life, that he was dying of cancer,
was a tactic he first perfected in his teens.
That consistent thread of fabricating a terminal illness is just so disturbing.
It speaks to the efficiency of the lie. A terminal illness gets immediate sympathy, it dissolves skepticism about finances.
And it pressures a partner into making quick final decisions about wills and estates.
It's the perfect setup for the kind of fraud he intended to commit.
So now we have to address a profoundly disturbing chapter of his early career, the Abu Dhabi incidents.
This was around 1989. He was 30 years old, working in Toulon Hospital in the UAE.
On the children's ward.
Yes. The context just highlights the immense trust that was placed in him as a nurse.
And within 6 months.
He was forced to resign. This was following an internal investigation into the highly unusual deaths of 3 children, all under the age of 6.
And critically, all 3 died of sudden, unexplained cardiac failure.
Which is medically rare for that age group unless there are serious pre-existing conditions.
So why was there no immediate police investigation into this deeply suspicious pattern of deaths?
The source materials point to a crucial cultural barrier.
Okay.
In the UAE, Islamic tradition generally forbids postmortems and favors very quick burials.
Which meant the forensic evidence needed to launch a formal police investigation.
Was simply not available at the time. This lack of legal scrutiny allowed Webster to leave the country relatively unscathed, despite serious internal suspicions.
What were the specific allegations that arose from his colleagues there?
His former co-worker and girlfriend at the time, Beth Brown, later provided critical testimony.
And she said?
She stated that Webster's supervisor suspected he had been killing the children using insulin injections.
Insulin.
Especially when administered secretly and in large doses, it's a potent murder weapon for someone in the medical field.
It would cause hypoglycemia, leading to rapid cardiac arrhythmia and sudden death.
And it can be extremely difficult to trace forensically unless the victim is tested very quickly. For a nurse working with vulnerable children, insulin would be the perfect, silent, undetectable poison.
That transforms his knowledge of caregiving into a horrific weapon. The fact that supervisors reportedly suspected he was injecting himself with insulin suggests a strange psychological experimentation as well.
It implies a deep fascination with the mechanics of poisoning. Perhaps testing dosages or practicing the technique.
So the entire incident, the internal investigation, the forced resignation, it all just allowed him to escape.
It did. The lack of police follow-up due to those cultural barriers meant he escaped justice for what were essentially suspected serial medical murders.
Before he ever committed homicide in Scotland.
Exactly.
And what role did that family connection play in his escape?
Well, the pervasive rumor, which is noted in the sources, is that his highly connected father used his influence to quietly facilitate his son's smooth departure from the UAE.
Ensuring he avoided any potential legal consequences.
Right. Webster later denied all the allegations regarding the children's deaths. But if his father did intervene, it means a high-level law enforcement official may have inadvertently helped a suspected serial killer escape an international investigation.
And that could have reinforced Webster's confidence that he could manipulate the system.
Because of his familial shield, yes.
It seems that after his return, this experience just solidified his predatory philosophy.
It appears so. He decided that hard work was optional and that financial gain would come through exploitation.
The source quotes his cynical motto.
Why work hard yourself when someone could be doing it for you? This became his guiding principle.
He sought out relationships with women, specifically those who had wealth or substantial financial independence.
Viewing them as long-term monetary targets, he was consistently described as a thief, liar, and philanderer.
A description that really summarizes his entire relationship strategy.
It does.
And this philosophy led directly to his first murder target, Claire Morris.
They married in September 1993.
And the level of premeditation is terrifying. He began preparing her for murder almost immediately after they married.
That preparation involved systematic drugging. The sources confirm that during their marriage, he regularly administered temazepam to Claire.
Temazepam?
It's a benzodiazepine used to treat insomnia, but when used improperly or repeatedly, it causes drowsiness, confusion, impaired judgment, and deep lethargy.
It was the ideal chemical method to subdue Claire.
Make her vulnerable and provide a convenient explanation for why she might have been unable to react or escape during a staged accident.
It suggests a slow, psychological, and chemical softening of the target before the final violent act.
Yes.
Which brings us to the night of May 27th, 1994, on the Auchenhoove to Tars Road in Aberdeenshire. Claire was 32. Let's analyze the mechanics of the crime itself because the staging was so deliberate and cold-blooded.
The prosecution successfully established that Webster had heavily drugged Claire.
And then
He deliberately parked the car near a tree before setting it on fire with her still inside the passenger seat.
his initial story, his fabricated story, was that he'd swerved violently to avoid a motorcyclist in the wrong lane.
But the evidence showed the car was not traveling at high speed. There were no skid marks consistent with a violent swerve.
So the accident was engineered to look chaotic.
But it was executed with painstaking precision.
The most chilling evidence of his calculated intent comes from the immediate aftermath at the crash scene itself.
Absolutely. An off-duty policeman arrived to help.
Right.
Webster, who had already exited the vehicle and was apparently distraught, twice informed the officer that there was no one else in the car.
He made that statement knowing Claire was unconscious and trapped inside, actively burning.
This action wasn't panic. It was a deliberate verbal confirmation designed to prevent any attempt at rescue,
Ensuring she died.
and that the evidence of drugging and arson was maximized by the resulting inferno. The car exploded shortly after.
Following this grotesque act, he immediately shifted into the role of the grieving widower.
And profited handsomely. Webster received a significant £200,000 life insurance payout.
Despite extensive medical examination confirming he had no major injuries.
He spent a week in the hospital claiming various issues, and most notoriously, he wore a neck brace to the funeral.
Maximizing the visual sympathy he could get from attendees.
All while having secured his financial objective. This theatrical display is so consistent with his earlier childhood tendencies to feign physical distress.
And the family's pain, particularly Claire's brother, Peter Morris, it just highlights the success of Webster's performance.
Peter Morris shared a deeply affecting memory of that funeral. He recalled holding Webster's hand, comforting him as the seemingly grieving widower.
He genuinely believed he was consoling a man who had suffered a tragic accident.
The realization years later that he had been holding the hand of his sister's murderer was an emotional trauma that just compounded the original loss. It shows the devastating credibility Webster maintained.
And yet, despite the successful staging and the insurance payout, immediate professional doubts arose.
From people who were right there on the scene.
And that skepticism proved crucial. A police officer who was not officially assigned to the case became so concerned by the physical evidence.
The slow speed, the lack of skid marks.
Claire's inability to escape, that he investigated the death on his own time. He was highly suspicious of the accidental death ruling.
And the observations of the first responders were equally damning.
The fireman, Derek McDonald.
He provided key testimony that the car showed no sign of violence to the vehicle. And he specifically noted that a car does not spontaneously combust when stopped or parked.
He dismissed the idea that the fire was a result of the crash itself.
His professional assessment, based on years of experience, pointed directly toward the use of an accelerant.
And then Claire's friend, Sarah Dawidak, and her husband wrote to the procurator fiscal.
To report a prior incident, yes. Claire had told them that months earlier, Webster had driven their car into a ditch in a similar, non-fatal event.
Suggesting he had tested his staging method before committing to the murder.
It certainly looks that way.
So the dots were there, but at the time, they weren't fully connected.
Which allowed Webster to escape justice for years. But even after his eventual conviction, the Morris family's battle for closure continued.
On the incredibly sensitive issue of Claire's final resting place.
This struggle over the headstone and the burial plot, what's known in Scotland as the grave layer, it highlights the bureaucratic agony that convicted criminals can continue to inflict.
Even from behind bars.
Right. Following Webster's conviction, Claire's family wanted to replace the headstone inscription.
To remove any reference to the marriage and use her maiden name.
Peter Morris articulated their grief, arguing the marriage itself was designed towards murder and therefore should not be acknowledged on her monument.
It's a profound moral claim, but they ran into a very specific legal hurdle.
A hurdle regarding property rights in Scottish law. The Aberdeenshire Council initially informed the family that Webster, as the surviving spouse, was the legal owner of the grave layer certificate.
So to change the inscription, they legally needed his permission.
Yes. Peter Morris refused to submit to this perverse situation. He said he would not go cap in hand to a convicted murderer just to restore his sister's dignity.
That must have been an agonizing impasse.
Yeah.
How is this complex legal and moral problem finally overcome?
Legal experts intervened. Most notably, a Professor Roderick Paisley, who devised a clever, circuitous solution using the Forfeiture Act, 1982.
The act that disqualifies someone from profiting from the death of the person they murdered.
Exactly. Professor Paisley suggested declaring Webster bankrupt on the grounds that he was disqualified from Claire's estate. If he was bankrupted, his assets, including the grave lair certificate, could be transferred to the family.
That's a brilliant strategy. He used a Civil Protection Act as a tool for emotional and spiritual justice.
Precisely. Although they didn't have to pursue the full bankruptcy route, the legal pressure mounted. The council ultimately conceded.
On what grounds?
They stated that the murder conviction against Webster rendered his contract with the council void. By confirming the contract was voided by his criminal actions, they could transfer the plot ownership.
And as a final measure?
Webster was formally banned from ever being buried alongside Claire. It was a victory for dignity, hard-won after years of legal struggle.
After the murder of Claire, Webster moved quickly to establish new predatory relationships.
He was not a grieving widower for long. He consistently sought new sources of income and validation, often overlapping his relationships.
That immediate progression just demonstrates the lack of remorse.
It's consistent with his sociopathic diagnosis. Shortly after Claire's death, he began a secret relationship with Geraldine Oakley, who worked at the same hospital.
And this relationship immediately reveals his deep-seated paranoia about being discovered.
It does. Her primary concerns stem from his repeated, anxious questioning about the possibility of a second autopsy being carried out on Claire.
He was obsessed with whether the official inquiry was truly finalized.
He was. And he tried to preemptively manage Oakley's perception of Claire by falsely claiming she had been epileptic and on medication.
Creating an alternate narrative for her confusion or drowsiness before death.
Right. Oakley testified that his anxiety made her so suspicious, she nearly reported her concerns to a consultant pathologist, James Grieve, but she hesitated.
Moving to 1995, we see him in Saudi Arabia, where he began a relationship with Brenda Grant.
And this relationship introduces another recurring element of his methodology, the aggressive use of drugs as a control measure.
Grant later revealed that Webster repeatedly offered her drugs.
She refused. And she believes that refusal is what ultimately saved her life, knowing his pattern of stupefying partners before financial or physical harm.
It suggests that drugging was a general operational tool for him, not just reserved for murder targets.
That seems to be the case. Grant also exposed his manipulative emotional tactics. She detailed how he would immediately turn on the waterworks, crying intensely and dramatically to shut down any difficult conversation.
This pattern of overlapping deception is highlighted again years later when he contacted Brenda Grant in 2005.
Yes. He reached out to arrange a trip to Paris, deploying his classic lie, claiming he was now suffering from terminal leukemia.
And what's chilling is that this trip, this lie, it directly overlapped with his relationship with Simone Banerjee,
whom he told he was receiving cancer treatment in London during the very same period. It just demonstrates his ability to maintain parallel relationships.
and used the same emotionally powerful lie simultaneously to manipulate two different women.
Toward his financial goals.
Before reaching his final target, Webster also encountered Christina Willis in 2002.
Right, this was after he fled New Zealand. His time with Willis was characterized by the familiar pattern of financial exploitation and evidence destruction.
A textbook Webster relationship.
It was. He habitually borrowed money from her without any intention of reimbursement, and he again deployed the cancer lie.
The most disturbing incident was his burning of a computer hard drive in her garden.
A clear act of actively destroying digital evidence relating to his past crimes, likely his flight from New Zealand or his ongoing financial frauds in the UK.
And his goals with Willis show a clear movement toward ultimate financial control.
Absolutely. He manipulated her into granting him power of attorney and persuading her to draft a will naming him as the sole beneficiary.
While he didn't progress to violence against Willis, the speculation in the source material is highly suggestive.
It suggests he ended the relationship only once he realized that Simone Banerjee was independently and significantly wealthier.
Shifting his focus to the more lucrative financial opportunity. The consistent driver was always maximum monetary gain.
Always.
His methods took a significant leap in scale when he met and married Felicity Drumm, an oncology nurse in New Zealand.
This was his second major attempt at homicide, and it was intended to net him an enormous £750,000.
From 9 separate insurance policies he took out on her life.
9 policies. It's an extraordinary number. It clearly shows the escalating scale of his greed.
Drumm married him in 1997, and despite the fact they had a son together.
His determination to kill her for the insurance money was unwavering. He saw the child as irrelevant to his financial scheme.
The drugging, which had been subtle with Claire Morris, became aggressive physical abuse against Drumm.
Drumm's testimony in court was graphic. She recalled sleeping for an astonishing 36 hours straight after consuming a drink he gave her during their honeymoon.
36 hours.
And on another occasion, she slept for 18 hours. She also suffered from double vision, and critically, a blood test showed abnormal liver function.
This wasn't accidental intoxication.
No, these were clear signs of prolonged, calculated poisoning attempts designed to damage her health, make her seem unreliable, and ultimately set the stage for a fatal accident.
And his early pyro tendencies came back with a vengeance during this marriage.
He orchestrated 3 separate fires. The first was in September 1997, when he set fire to the living room furniture at their cottage in Linneskeen.
Then, in January 1999,
he started a fire at the Auckland property they were planning to buy, likely to extract insurance funds to delay the actual purchase payment.
And then a month later, he escalated the intimidation.
By setting fire to an armchair in Felicity Drumm's parents' home in Takapuna.
How did these acts of arson connect to his wider control tactics?
The control was methodical. Drumm discovered her driving license on Webster's desk after one of the fires.
That small act of controlling her primary identification
meant he was physically impeding her ability to leave, to travel, or to seek independent help.
And at the same time, he repeatedly stalled the payment for their new Auckland house,
using excuses about delayed money transfers from Scotland, thus maintaining maximum financial leverage over their assets.
The second decisive staged crash came on February 12, 1999, the deadline for the Auckland home payment.
This time, his victim was alert and able to react.
Webster drove Drumm to the bank that day, claiming he needed to finalize the transfer.
While driving, he suddenly cried out that the steering wheel was malfunctioning. The car swerved violently across 2 lanes of traffic before ending up in a ditch.
But crucially, Drumm grabbed the wheel
and realized instantly that it was working perfectly fine. The mechanism was the same as the murder of Claire. A staged, low-velocity crash disguised as a tragic accident.
His actions immediately following the crash were highly suspicious.
He immediately got out of the car, rushed to the boot, and repeatedly screamed at Drumm to stay in the vehicle.
Given his history of arson,
it is highly probable he was attempting to retrieve an accelerant or a tool from the boot to finish the job.
But Drumm refused to stay.
Instead, she phoned her lawyer. Facing confrontation and the collapse of his scheme, Webster resorted to his final manipulative tactic. He feigned a heart attack.
To halt the immediate legal and financial scrutiny.
Right. And while he was in the hospital, recovering from his invented ailment, Drumm realized the full extent of his financial betrayal.
She discovered he had already systematically cleaned out 140,000 New Zealand dollars from their joint bank account.
This realization cemented the fact that the crash was the culmination of a massive financial scheme.
When Drumm eventually confronted him about his plan to kill her, what was his terrifyingly narcissistic response?
Webster delivered the truly chilling line, "She would have died happy."
That statement just perfectly encapsulates the sociopathic mindset.
He genuinely believed his manipulative charm was so overwhelming that his victims would accept, perhaps even welcome, their murder.
Felicity Drumm later described her estranged husband publicly as a psychopath.
Having survived the prolonged psychological and physical abuse,
Webster failed to appear in court, and 4 warrants were issued for his arrest in New Zealand.
For arson, supplying a drug, and stupefying his wife. He had physically attacked the mother of his child and fled the country.
But this was only the start of the final push for justice.
He escaped justice for years, returning to the UK to continue his spree of deception, knowing he was a wanted man overseas.
His spree continued with his final target, Simone Banerjee,
whom he met after his relationship with Christina Willis ended. The scheme was predictable: bigamy and coercion for her estate.
He planned to marry Banerjee bigamously, having once again lied that he was suffering from terminal leukemia.
And in line with his modus operandi, he convinced her to change her will, designating him as the sole beneficiary of her entire considerable estate.
This was the final, inevitable financial endgame.
It was.
But the police, who were finally connecting the fragments of his past crimes, intervened with a formal life-saving warning.
This is a critical legal element in this case. The police presented Banerjee with what is called an Osman warning,
which is a formal notification that your life is at risk from a third party.
It's not just a casual suggestion. It's a legal acknowledgement that authorities have credible intelligence that the recipient is in imminent danger.
And this warning revealed Webster's extensive past.
Confirming his multiple aliases, his financial crimes, and crucially, the existence of his current wife and son.
Despite receiving this official notification from law enforcement, Banerjee's initial reaction speaks volumes about the power of Webster's manipulation.
She admitted she initially dismissed the warning as nonsense.
It just illustrates the sheer depth of the illusion Webster was capable of creating.
Only after reflection did she confirm that he was a very good actor and undeniably charming, which made him seem entirely trustworthy.
Banerjee was a frequent sailor, and she later pieced together what she believed was Webster's planned method for her murder.
She conjectured he intended to drown her by staging a boating accident while they were sailing.
And the terrifying discovery she made afterward
Was that the foil on her life jacket had been deliberately punctured. She inspected the other jackets and found them to be intact.
She stated, "I have pretty much no doubt that the boat was the way it was going to go."
It shows that even when faced with new environments, Webster simply adapted his core method. A staged accident, disabling the victim, and ensuring death for financial gain.
Before Operation Field finally brought him down, we should acknowledge the breadth of his predatory trail.
The other relationships mentioned in the source material that weren't part of the primary indictment.
The sources confirm his reach was extensive. One girlfriend, Anne Hancock, testified that he had earned the sinister nickname Dr. Death.
And the list of other relationships includes a married woman who declined identification, a 15-year-old who became pregnant and aborted their baby,
and a deeply tragic reference to another woman who later took her own life.
A family requested anonymity for her story. It just underscores that while the prosecution focused on the two wives he attempted to murder, his existence left a wide wake of financial destruction and profound psychological distress.
The wheels of justice finally started turning in 2007. What was the catalyst that started the massive investigation?
The initial police focus was actually on a minor financial crime. Simone Banerjee's house was searched in 2007 following information that Webster had embezzled funds from an angling club.
Right.
During that search, police seized a stolen laptop and an unlicensed gun.
And the discovery of that stolen property opened the door to much deeper scrutiny.
It did. The investigation, officially named Operation Field, was formally launched in 2008. The scope was enormous,
Spanning 5 years of intense police work.
and requiring investigators to interview 1,000 people across multiple jurisdictions. The police systematically re-examined Claire Morris's death.
And the New Zealand police reactivated the investigation into the attempted murder of Felicity Drumm.
It was a painstaking process of connecting crimes that had been successfully compartmentalized by Webster for over a decade.
And there was one intriguing and chilling detail discovered on his computer.
Yes. Investigators discovered a report about the infamous British serial killer, Dr. Harold Shipman, on Webster's computer.
Shipman was a trusted doctor who murdered hundreds of his patients.
Finding this report strongly suggests that Webster, a nurse who used his position to access powerful drugs and stage deaths, studied other high-profile medical predators.
He was likely seeking to understand their methods, their weaknesses.
And, most importantly, how they were eventually caught so he could avoid their mistakes. It implies a conscious, calculated decision to emulate certain criminal methodologies.
Webster was eventually charged in 2009, and the resulting legal process was historic for Scotland.
He was found guilty at the High Court of Justiciary in Glasgow on May 19, 2011. The trial itself became the longest criminal trial in Scottish history involving a single accused.
It ran for 5 months.
It did. The jury returned a mix of unanimous and majority verdicts, confirming his guilt on all the major counts.
And what was the punishment imposed for this extensive history of calculated violence and fraud?
On July 5, 2011, Malcolm Webster was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years.
Given his age, that was functionally a whole life term.
It was. He was also appropriately struck from the nursing register.
The sources paint a grim picture of his life incarcerated.
The man who excelled at controlling vulnerable women found himself utterly unable to control the dynamics of a high-security prison.
He reportedly told other inmates he expects to die there.
And details emerged that he was attacked with a metal pole by a fellow inmate. Following further instances of violence, he refused to shower for months on end.
The man who prided himself on his intellectual superiority and charm
Was reduced to hiring a convicted child molester for protection. It illustrates how quickly his constructed reality crumbled when faced with genuine physical danger and a lack of control.
Finally, his legal fight didn't end with the conviction.
No, he embarked on a lengthy appeals process that only served to draw out the pain and expense for the victims' families.
In December 2013, his appeal court quashed convictions on 2 minor fire-raising charges.
But critically, they upheld the core findings of murder and attempted murder. Webster dropped a further appeal in 2014, but then petitioned the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, the SCCRC.
For our listeners, what exactly is the SCCRC?
The Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission is an independent body that investigates potential miscarriages of justice in Scottish criminal cases. It's an essential safety valve for the justice system.
But for the victim's family, every review, every appeal reopens the wounds.
It does. Peter Morris, Claire's brother, publicly voiced intense criticism, accusing the SCCRC of wasting time.
He noted that Webster had been found guilty by a jury, and then Scotland's 3 most senior judges had confirmed that verdict.
He questioned the integrity of the extended legal process, asking, how many opportunities do they give someone to appeal?
That sentiment just underscores the continuous legal burden and emotional exhaustion faced by victims' families.
It does.
And what was the final outcome of that exhaustive review?
In February 2016, the SCCRC rejected Webster's petition. A spokesperson confirmed the case would not be referred back to the High Court, confirming his conviction for a final time.
Hopefully, bringing some measure of enduring certainty and closure to the victims' families.
Hopefully.
When we review this entire span of source material, what stands out is the profound, pathological consistency in Webster's actions. The lies, the financial desperation, the calculated use of drugs, and the staged accidents. They form a single, terrifying blueprint.
The pathology is unwavering. He wasn't opportunistic, he was methodical.
The PAM or insulin to disable the victim.
And relying on staging accidents, the car crash, the boat incident, to mask the homicide as a tragedy.
He consistently leveraged the lie of terminal illness and played the role of the distraught patient.
To facilitate the fraudulent acquisition of wills and bank account access, it was a deeply impersonal, business-like approach to violence.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the critical intervention that stopped his spree, the moment his business model was fundamentally disrupted,
was the police delivery of the Osmond warning to Simone Banerjee.
That is the definitive turning point.
It is. The formal Osmond warning provided irrefutable evidence of his past, bypassing the powerful manipulation of his personality.
Had the police not acted on their intelligence and provided her with that information,
it is overwhelmingly probable that Malcolm Webster would have succeeded in committing bigamy and murder for a 3rd time,
securing yet another fortune before moving on to the next vulnerable target. That warning saved a life.
It did.
So what does this all mean for us? We have a man who was convicted of murder and attempted murder, driven entirely by financial greed and protected for years by a highly effective veneer of charm. Yet his own father was a detective chief superintendent and the head of the Metropolitan Police Fraud Squad.
This raises a final provocative thought for you to consider. How does a fraudster, whose entire career involved complex deception and systematic violence, managed to operate repeatedly across multiple countries and evade rigorous investigation for so long?
Given his intimate familial connection to the very highest levels of law enforcement dedicated to hunting financial crime.
Did that connection perhaps give him a perverse form of confidence or operational knowledge that allowed him to believe he was truly untouchable?
Until Operation Field finally connected the distant, disparate pieces of his life. It's a chilling question of influence and confidence that hung over the entire investigation.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening.